Good evening. On behalf of the National Coalition Against Censorship and the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, welcome to our student strategy session on how to fight book bans. I'm Christine Emran, NCAC's Youth Free Expression Program Director. Tonight's session is designed to be really interactive. We want you to have space to discuss the current attacks on books in schools and hopefully learn some tactics and arguments to help defend the right to read. We have 3 speaker groups, and then we'll open the floor to questions and discussion. As we go along, please post questions in the chat for any of our speakers or just general questions. Let's start with a message from author Judy Bloom.
Hi, everybody. I'm Judy Bloom. I've been writing books for readers of all ages since before most of you were born, maybe before your parents were born. Thank you for being here, for seeing that there is a real crisis and wanting to help. My books have been challenged and banned in schools and libraries across the country for decades. And what's kept me going is you and students like you who deserve to read honest books that challenge you to think and question and discover. Because book censorship, well, it's about silencing ideas that make the censors uncomfortable, that might make readers ask questions that the censors don't want to answer. Long ago, when I first wrote Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and I gave 3 copies to my kids' elementary school, the male principal there decided that the book could not be on the shelf because in it, girls talk about getting their periods, and the subject of menstruation, he said, just wasn't appropriate for elementary school. Never mind like how many girls already had their periods. And then it happened in other places, and kids started to stand up. Kids started to come to school board meetings and tell the school board why this book or that book, mine or somebody else's, was important to them, why they wanted to read it, why they needed to read it. And in some cases, that really helped. That helped the school board understand, and the books sometimes were not taken out of the school library. So the fact that you're here means you know what's going on. But let me give a little context. Over the past few years, free speech groups have tracked about 300 to 400 book challenges per year. That number has jumped sharply. In just the first 3 months of this school year, from September through November, more than 300 challenges were reported. I was a member of the board at the National Coalition Against Censorship for 20 years, and I can tell you that the media reports are not exaggerating. This is a crisis. As an author, hearing people say that your book is dangerous or damaging, it can be incredibly painful. It was that way for me in the beginning until I said, no, I'm not going to sit back and take this. I'm going to do something, which is what you're doing now. I mean, we write the books we wanted to read as young people, books that maybe would have made our lives better. But even harder is seeing the effect on young people when books that reflect their lives, your lives, are labeled as bad and wrong and dangerous. I firmly believe that reading opens minds, it opens hearts, it opens doors to ideas and worlds that we might not otherwise get to experience. And students should have access to books that make them feel something, that challenge their beliefs and expectations, and that allow them to connect with characters and stories. As upsetting as it is to see these books that mean so much to readers taken off the shelves, I'm inspired by the students, like some of you here tonight, who have stood up and made your voices heard. I know it's not easy to publicly object to what's happening in your community and to talk about all the personal reasons these books matter. But let me tell you, student voices, your voices are really the most important voices in this fight. So keep it up, talk to each other, share your strategies, and know that you have a legion of supporters, teachers, librarians, writers among them, all across the country. So on behalf of my fellow authors, my sister authors, thank you, student activists, for your courage and defense of all young people's right to read and learn, because you are the true leaders. And please keep up the good fight. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Now we're really lucky to get to hear from two authors who have unfortunately faced serious challenges to their books, but also have some great insight into thoughtful strategies for opposing book bans. Author Mari Naomi's book, Losing the Girl, has been banned for its LGBTQ+ and sexual content. And Maya Kobabe's graphic novel, Genderqueer, has been one of the most challenged books of the past year. Thanks, Mari, Naomi, and Maya for being here.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
Welcome. Mari, Naomi, could you tell us about the censorship of your work? Why is it being challenged? How did you find out about the challenges, and how has it impacted you?
Well, so my book, Losing the Girl, is actually the first book in a trilogy. This is the whole trilogy. And I first heard about the ban when my friend's boyfriend read it in the LA Times and saw my name and said, "Hey, isn't that your friend, Mari?" And so I was pretty shocked. In the article, it said that it was being targeted for queer content in Katy, Texas. It was one of two books that was, there are far more books in Katy, Texas that are now being banned, but I was kind of the pioneer. Whew. And it supposedly was for queer content, which is funny because the queer content doesn't come into play until book 2. So the character's still kind of in the closet in book 1. So I think they didn't read it, or else the LA Times was wrong. And yeah, you know, I've always joked that, oh, it'd be great to have a book ban on one of my books, because then I'll make some sales. And be careful what you wish for, because when it happened, my feelings were so hurt. I just got so depressed thinking about just the students. I mean, and yeah, my book sales did go up because people with means are able to buy it now. However, the people who I really want to reach are the people who don't have the means and who might, sorry, I'm going on here, but who might need to read it. And yeah, big bummer.
Thanks, Mari, Naomi. What about you, Maya?
It's kind of a similar story. The first genderqueer book ban I heard about, I actually read about in the field guide of banned books from the American Library Association. There had been one challenge in Huntington Beach in California sometime in 2020 that sort of missed my radar. I didn't hear about it when it happened. And so I read about that and I was like, what? Like this, what? Huh? I didn't know any of the details. And then of course there was sort of a second wave, which started in September of last year, sort of in the lead up to the midterm election. And that one I definitely heard about because it was much more in the news. It started in Fairfax County, Virginia, but then it quickly spread to several other counties in Virginia, and then a bunch of other states, including Texas, Rhode Island, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, I think Iowa, Washington State, and I think there was a challenge in Alaska. At this point, it's almost hard to keep up. There have been so many challenges. And yeah, it's such a weird circumstance. I definitely think my book is also being targeted because of queer content about queerness, sexuality, gender identity, questioning yourself, coming out, all of those themes. I also think both my book and Mari's book are uniquely vulnerable to bans because they're both graphic novels. And I think it's easier for people to flip open a graphic novel and see one or two images that they disagree with and excerpt them and then spread them on social media. And they might get a little bit more viral than, say, like a screen cap of a paragraph of prose text would, although prose books are also being banned and challenged. And a same thing that Mari expressed, it's really unfortunate when a book gets banned, because what I've learned through this experience is a book ban doesn't really hurt the book or the author. It hurts the community where the ban is happening. And basically what I see this as is communities kind of attacking themselves. And it's always the case that, yes, if there's a rise in sales, it's people who have means and privilege and who are maybe listening to NPR, who are buying books. And it's the marginalized readers, the most marginalized readers who are getting further marginalized and have their access denied. It's the people who don't have the money to buy a book, or people who wouldn't feel safe bringing a queer book into their home, and people who could only read it from the library or from a school library, and maybe even would read it secretly in the shelves and like not even check it out or bring it back to, home or school. And those are the readers that are like being most affected. And those are the readers that, of course, we like most want our books to reach. So a bummer, as Mari said.
Oh no. Maya, what are some ways that your readers, in particular young people, have responded to the censorship? Have any of them reached out to you, or have any of them organized to bring attention to and protest the censorship?
Yes, both of those things. I've been hearing from many young people, a lot of Instagram DMs, which I so appreciate. I've been hearing like really touching, lovely stories from young readers. And then specifically in Virginia, a group of students founded a group called the Pride Liberation Project, which last I checked, it had like over 400 LGBTQ students and allies from over 30 schools in that area. And they wrote letters of support of my book and also Lawn Boy, another book that was being hit with challenges at the same time. And they were successful in several of the districts. The bans and challenges were overturned and the books were returned to the shelf. And they have a very active Twitter account if you want to check them out, that's at Pride Liberation. So I have been so impressed by student activism and students standing up. And it's amazing to me because I was so politically unaware as a teenager. I didn't pay attention to anything until I was like in college or later. So seeing high school students being so politically engaged is inspiring to me.
Thanks, Maya. What about you, Mari, Naomi?
I actually haven't heard from any kids.
People write to Mari.
I am tagged a lot on Instagram from librarians and libraries and such, but yeah, I wish more kids would reach out to me because I would tell them to fight the good fight. There's a director who directed me in a movie where I sort of played myself for a second, and she reached out to me and said she really wanted to do something about this, and neither of us really knew what to do about this. All I could do is sit in my house and cry with all my money. Just kidding, I don't have that much money. But
if only.
I know. So what she decided to do was do a free screening of the movie that I was in, that does have some queer characters and me, and a free screening, and then we did a little Q&A panel at the end of it, which was interesting. Much like today, I actually don't know how to fix everything. And I was kind of stymied when someone said, so what do we do? How do we fix everything? And I was just like, so that was fun. But now I have more answers, now that I've prepared myself more. So there was a little action going on. I know there was an audience there. It was after a movie, and I was actually on Zoom. I was the only person who was dialing in because I was afraid of COVID, and everyone else was there. And I couldn't see or hear anything. So someone had their phone up so that I could hear what was happening. And so I was just like smiling into my iPad. And then afterwards I realized, wow, that was a movie theater. I wonder if my head was giant with tiny little people. And it turns out that's exactly what was happening. My giant head was on a big movie screen. Sorry, I digress. But that's how I've acted. And I gave away some of my books to people in the audience. And so there's a bit of that. But yeah, I want to do so much more. I don't know what to do exactly.
Thanks, Mari. Naomi. Maya, what are some ways that creators can be allies to students who engage with their work and who might be harmed by censorship?
Yeah, I mean, I think just listening to student voices and trying to support specifically student leadership is good. It is sometimes hard to know what to do. In my case, and I think in Mari's case as well, a lot of the bans have happened not in the state where we live, often hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. So yeah, I just try to respond to every single message and email that I get. And whenever there's like a petition that can be signed or like something that I can boost, like if the students are, yeah, like I have a letter or a website or a social media group that I can like repost, I always try to do that. And yeah, just encourage students like, yeah, this is your rights. This is your access. Like, this is very much like it's your access that's being challenged here. And so you're the one who most deserves like to speak up about it, but also like to be heard because it's your issue. And hopefully, yeah, that you know that there are lots of adults that support you and are on the same side, and it's not all on your shoulders, but we do really appreciate your energy, because some of us have been doing this for a long time, and though we're very committed, sometimes we're tired, and when you guys come in with fresh energy, it's really exciting and helpful.
Thanks, Maya.
Christine,
How about you, Maya? Yes.
I was going to ask the students if they had approached their librarians and found out if they have a reconsideration policy and what does that policy look like? Because that's the first lever as far as combating banning and removal of books in the library. If your librarian has one, then I would ask if you take a look at it and see how strong it is, as far as what do they say should happen? Do they have in the wording that the book, the minute somebody voices a complaint about it, do they take it off the shelves? In our policy, we don't take it off the shelf. You actually have to go through a written process stating exactly why you want this book to be taken off. And then we convene a committee. And you need to look at if a committee is required, what is the makeup of that committee? So those are some places that you can start advocating for yourself, because there are a lot of allies that do not want books to be taken off the shelf.
Yes.
But those policies are the first lever in order to keep things from going forward.
Thank you, Deborah. Mari, do you have any last words?
You know, the way that the effect of the book ban for me was I've been making comics since the 90s, and most of them were autobiographical and not for a young audience. And the young adult trilogy was sort of a lark, and I thought, you know, I'll try writing for younger people and see what that's like. And it was fine. I wrote 3 books, but after you're done, you know, writing and drawing 900 pages of something, you're like, okay, well, maybe time to move on. And I think what this book ban did for me was make me want to write more for young people, whereas I was kind of over it before, but now I'm like, okay, well, people need it, so let's go.
I love that.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maya and Mari, Naomi, for sharing your experiences. Remember to post your questions in the chat for our Q&A a little later on. Now we'll hear from 3 students who have advocated against book bans in York, Pennsylvania, and San Antonio, Texas. I have the pleasure to introduce Ida Gupta and Olivia Patouche from Central York School District and Amanda Jennings from Northeast Independent School District. Welcome, everyone. Olivia and Ida, can you talk about what happened at your school and why you decided to get involved in activism?
Yeah, so basically, there was a book ban of over 300 books spanning from BIPOC authors, LGBTQ characters, and BIPOC characters of books from elementary to secondary level education at our school. This was a diversity resource list created by teachers after the murder of George Floyd to educate students on these issues that often don't come to light in in our education system, and often, and at the time was something that teachers felt needed to be more educated upon. So if a student, suppose went to a teacher and said, I want to learn more about civil rights or, the LGBTQ movement, that teacher could then recommend them a book off this diversity resource list just to make that job easier for teachers and students. So in September 2021, we were informed of the news that our school board, the Central York School Board, thought these books were divisive and thought these books weren't good for the classroom or weren't good for students to be learning about, which we took issue with because a lot of these books were elementary level books, and books like I Am Enough by Grace Byers or books like All Are Welcome were banned, which are basically books that just promote an equity and inclusion and love in the classroom, and nothing that was in these books was divisive, and everything in these books what we saw would only increase inclusion and love and in our school district. So because of my personal experience and because of everyone and their experiences in this district, first of all, we knew that diversity education was not something that was really great in the past in our school district, and we knew that there was a lot of work to be done, but this ban just kind of seemed like we were moving in the opposite direction. So because of that, we decided to take a stand. We started doing protests outside of our school for 15 minutes before school started. We made over 20 posters, things like My Voice Matters and Education is Not Indoctrination, just things to show the parents that were dropping their students to school what we stood for, and students that were coming in, what was really happening at the school, because first of all, not really many people really knew what was going on, because we did find out by a secondary newspaper source that from our town. We didn't even figure out from the school board. And we found out several months after this decision was taken. So for a lot of matters, we knew that this was not something that they wanted to showcase, and for good reason. And it was something that we needed to stand up about, because we knew that, if we weren't the ones to take action about it, it was going to be hard to have a change happen. So yeah, our protest garnered a lot of students. We did it for about 2 weeks. 50, 60, 70, up to 70 students came, and we have, pictures of us at the protest and speaking at the protests, just, saying like, education is not indoctrination, and like these things are not acceptable in our school system. These little children that are going to be growing up, like we're all seniors, but these little children that are going to be growing up in this school system are going to be exposed to materials that it's going to make them feel less than, and they're not going to feel appreciated or represented in their own schooling. So after that, we kind of just blew up. We started talking to a lot of people, a lot of connections were made, and there was an overwhelming amount of support from the community. A lot of community protests we spoke at, one with over 200 people, and it was just a very overwhelming, gratifying experience to be a part of. And eventually the ban was overturned on September 20th. Of this year. And today, our organization that staged the protest and kind of started this thing is the Panther Anti-Racist Union. And today we hold weekly meetings that just provide a safe space for students to come and talk about their experiences with race, diversity, and any experience that they've had in this district that they feel the need to talk about and to discuss. And we educate about, the LGBTQ community. We educate about BIPOC voices in the community. So yeah, we just provide that for students today.
Thank you so much, Ida. Olivia, would you like to add something?
Honestly, I think she nailed it pretty well. We're fighting and, kind of standing up for all of those kids who might not have their voice yet, might not have that confidence to really share their opinion on what's happening, or maybe are not even in the place to understand what's happening yet. So we're really just standing with all the young children who shouldn't have to go through and not be able to see themselves in their own schools and not be able to learn about their own history in their schools, when that should be a safe place for them to do exactly those things.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Amanda, would you like to share your experiences with us?
Hi, so I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and Texas is not the first state to come to mind when you think liberal state. So that's all. I'm just going to preface that. And basically what happened in my situation was back in November, my school district decided to implement the Kraus list which, if you don't know what it is, it's a list written by a Republican lawmaker in Fort Worth, which not even in San Antonio, that was sent out to school districts all across Texas. It was sent completely informally, and it was completely optional. And the list basically, the letter basically told school districts to implement this list in your book reviews to remove these books from the shelves. And the list consists of many POC and LGBTQ authors, characters, and even just nonfiction textbooks like about Trail of Tears or, slavery. Yeah. So my school decided to implement this, and as you'd expect, the community was not very happy with that. So most of us went to the board meeting, and I went with a few of my friends. I didn't know that I was going to speak at the board meeting until we got there, and my friends who had these whole speeches written out were like, I'm too nervous to speak because there was a lot of people there. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it for you. Like, I don't have a whole speech written out. Obviously I had opinions on it, but definitely taking that step and being, representing other people who maybe don't want to speak up, that was definitely encouraging for not only just myself and what I can do, but also, others in my community. And so at the meeting, after the community spoke about it, the board members also spoke about it. And it turned out a lot of the board members did not actually know what was going on with the book ban. They thought it was just, another review of the books. They did not know that the superintendent was actually using this very discriminatory list, or that there were they were going around their usual rules of book reviews. Like, they were completely just ignoring, our normal process of reviewing books and just saying, just take them all off the shelf. So then they expressed their concern. And so that definitely felt good to know that people who were in power had, opinions that were similar to ours. So it's basically what happened. That's all.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Olivia, can you share with students some strategies on what you did that worked well, or what you would do differently?
So I think there's a shorter list of things that are really, really crucial in forming these protests and really getting your point across. One of the main ones is education. Education is such an important factor. Without that education factor, you won't get anywhere. So one of our big steps was educating our classmates, our teachers, our community members, the world, what was happening and how it was so damaging. Because some people don't even realize what's happening and don't understand the weight that it truly carries, especially on the younger generations. So just getting that education out there and letting people understand what's happening is a huge factor. And also having patience. It's a long road, and there's so many bumps and ups and downs. So having patience and making sure that you have a good mindset to begin, so that whenever you do face those bumps, because you're gonna face them, you don't give up. And one of our other big things was controlling the narrative, because this is such a triggering political kind of situation. It would be really easy for an outside person or someone who was trying to block what we were doing to take our words and twist them. So our big thing was we were controlling what people kind of said in our message. We were saying, this is what we stand for. If you hear anything else, that's not coming from our group, basically, because we really wanted to make sure that there was no possible way that our words would be twisted to make us to make our kind of plan in our kind of situation that we wanted, wouldn't be twisted. Involving the community was also a big thing, and kind of spreading the word. Once you get people, it just continues to spread. And once you get that first education, and with that first word out, it spreads like wildfire. So just spreading the word and involving the community, those are two crucial things also. As for things to do differently, I would say one of the only things that we really should have prepared ourselves for was that it was going to be a lot harder than we anticipated. We kind of saw what was happening. We're like, oh, let's set up some protests. Let's kind of spread the message to the school. Let's do this. And we were not prepared for the how it would just take off and go running. We were not prepared for the long battle. We were not prepared for all of the ups and downs. So I think we really got carried into it really, really quickly. So I think we definitely should have prepared ourselves a little bit more. But now that we have that mindset, we are better at entering a situation, having those mindsets and having those kind of preparations in mind. So yeah.
Thank you, Olivia. Ida, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, being a student activist is like a lot of mental and emotional fatigue that you go through. When you first start this, you're like, there was such excitement surrounding this. This is something new, something I was not used to doing. And it's not in excitement and like, I love that this book ban is happening. It's like, I'm standing up for something that I believe in, and it's new, and it's terrifying, but it's also, so gratifying at the same time. And there inevitably is failure. Like that would happen. Like in the midst of our protest, we got secondary emails saying that like they were going to stay with their decision with the ban. They weren't going to, move, and that was going to be what was going to happen, and nothing was going to be done after that. And in that moment, like we were so discouraged as students, as teachers, as a student body, as in general. Like it is so easy to get discouraged, but instead of seeing those failures as failures, see those failures as road bumps to success. People are feeling threatened by your activism. People are seeing that your activism is working. And that's why they feel the need to reinforce their stance on their issue. So, just keep going, because it's going to get really hard. There's extracurriculars. We're all students. We have classes to deal with. But in the end, what we have achieved makes it so much worth it. It makes it all worth it in the end.
Thank you, Ida. Amanda.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to what Ida said about the speed bumps, because a lot of the people in my community especially aren't very supportive. So we didn't have those big groups of protesting, because a lot of kids at the school either don't know about this or do know about it and still don't agree with us. That's just how it is. And so it was definitely discouraging to feel that, but I do think it did help to allow me and my friends to just keep pushing on, because we realized it's something that we really need. And so it kind of gave us encouragement to continue pushing and continue and keep on going. And it's been about 2 months since the school board meeting district, and the school board, my school board, still is saying they're implementing the ban. But more recently, we've gotten in contact with attorneys and law firms, and so we're deciding to take legal action. And I feel like in most cases you can, with Ida and Olivia, like I feel like you can protest your way to where the school board does say, we don't want to, deal with the protests anymore, we just will stop with it, and we hear you and stuff like that. But in places such as San Antonio, Texas, that's not really an option. So I feel like having those connections with certain people and just continuing on with your work helps you to reach the level where you can get legal action. And that is not the best case scenario, but it is what is needed to prevent it. And so that's my 2 cents.
Well, thank you, Ida, Olivia, Amanda, for sharing your stories with us, and to all the students who have stood up to defend books, especially in the school year. Just a reminder to keep posting your questions in the chat so we can address them during the Q&A after our next set of speakers. Now, let's discuss how student organizations and school librarians can ally with students facing book bans. Lily Freeman is a member of the 2021-2022 Gleason National Student Council cohort, and Deborah Quarles is the head librarian at the Shaker Heights Middle School in Cleveland, Ohio. Lily, let's start with you. How to prepare student activists against book bans in terms of backlash?
Yeah, so well, first of all, I'm going to introduce myself and say a little bit of background of what I can do before I can kind of get into different ways that students can help out and different ways to prepare students for that backlash. So my name is Lily Freeman and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm so excited to be speaking today. A little background on me. I'm a Jewish female of trans experience, and I live in a small little town outside of Philadelphia where I strive to bring inclusion and DEI education into schools. In my school experience, I've been targeted with different cyber or personal attacks by both students and teachers. And I've also been at the forefront for seeing how divided and uneducated classroom and school environments could be. I think I really believe my goal is to create that environment that other students were talking about, where students are free to be themselves. And I'd like for the younger generation to live in a world where they don't have to worry about things in school that I had to and still worry about day to day. Along with my local advocacy, I also work with GLSEN in the National Student Council and strive to provoke change on a national level with my fellow NSC members. Over the course of the last few months, me and my family have witnessed the effects of actions against books with diversity, and we knew that we had to speak up. So one day, while me and my mom were brainstorming, we decided to create an ongoing web series, which you can actually find on Instagram, titled Project Uncensored. I'll put that in the chat later. It was created based on a major uptick of school districts and school boards across the country banning or relocating books based mostly on race, gender, or sexuality. This really hit home when a neighboring district right here in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, voted to ban books from their library shelves, one being Heather Has Two Mommies. And a website called Woke PA has called out specific books in our school district as well, even creating a petition to fire the head of the library in our district. So we knew that we needed to fight back. Our goal is to highlight LGBTQ+ children's literature in K-12 schools, many of which have been challenged or banned. We want to bring awareness to what the books are about and why they're so important to have in school libraries, and to ask that people viewing our Instagram and TikTok, if you're social media savvy, to share these videos, read these books, and pay attention to what is going on in your local school district so that we share the love and stop the ban. And this is working. I'm working with my school's GSA, our local Planned Parenthood's Rainbow Room, this panel that I'm on right now, and we're getting the word out and spreading awareness of what's going on and what to do, since many people don't know. So what can we do? First of all, simply, we can read the books. I think it's very important that everybody reads the books that are being banned, because these books show the experiences and educational material that we need. What I notice most in the harassment I've experienced in schools is that it comes from the people who are uneducated about my identity and my experiences, and that they and everyone would be able to benefit from reading these books just like I have in the past. But the problem is not that everybody has access to these books. The fact remains that some kids aren't in homes safe enough for them to bring them home. And some kids don't have the money to go buy these books. Some kids live in areas where there are no public libraries or even public transportation to get to a public library to borrow books. I think the fact remains that the local school library is the single best resource for children. And reading these books is one thing, but sharing them with others is the step that will enact the change. I think as allies, we can donate these books to local private libraries, buy these books for your friends. I think you can even send them as ebooks now. And I think if you want to go a step further, I encourage you to work with your school's GSAs. A small community in a school can have a large impact. I know it definitely has for me. We're working on some efforts to get the word out about banned books in our school district. I think teachers especially taking initiative on these diversity clubs means a lot to the students and shows great support, because you are taking that leadership position and you are being a role model for those students and preparing them for this backlash and giving that safe space to them that they need. I think if you're feeling really strong about these topics, this is a really good idea that me and my mom were talking about lately. You can start a banned book club, which I think is really cool. So you can round up a group of students and every week just have like a conversation about these books and spread information about what's going on. And you could also talk about library policy and how books are chosen. That's very important to know. And I think these can also be a source of these books for your fellow students who aren't able to have them. And I think the most important thing we can do is raise awareness. There are the 3 A's. There's awareness, which hopefully will spark acceptance, but we don't always have to have that agreement. We just want to raise that awareness, and that's the most powerful thing, and that will cause acceptance. And even though we have many voices against us who will give us backlash, I think our voices are even stronger.
Thank you so much, Lily. How can students also reach out to teachers or librarians as allies?
I think what I was saying later, I think the teachers taking that initiative and having that safe space and that area for students to create and think alike, and for those students to talk about these books and talk about what they can do.
Great. And one last question. How can teens that are exploring gender with unsupportive parents or those that need privacy can access like such library books that are being challenged? Do you have suggestions?
Yeah, one thing in my GSA that we talk about is we have a focus on how important the ally is. The ally is somebody that can provide that safe space, that can be there for people who don't have that environment at home. There's somebody who can create that environment. So I believe as an ally, allies should be able to provide these books and to create environments where students are able to read these books and also speak out against censorship, which is what we're talking about today.
Thank you so much, Lily.
Of course.
Now, Deborah, let's talk about how to create allyships with students or religious minorities, diverse populations that feel suppressed. And also let's talk a little bit about the importance of intellectual freedom. Can you share some insights with us?
Yes, I can. I'd like to also follow up with some of what Lily was talking about. We have a day of silence at our school, and once you say you're going to be an ally, the guidance department actually sponsors this. And I was going to tell students to also include your guidance counselors, because most of your guidance counselors will be supportive of you. So in addition to your librarian, include your guidance counselors. But they sponsor an ally day, and it's called a day of silence. And so you wear badges with an ally emblem on it. And then the kids know that they can have you as an ally. And both me and our library tech, who works also in the library with me, we have ally badges displayed on our computers. So kids know that we're allies. Most librarians will be your allies. That's just who we are. We try to support our student body. And we try to make sure that they feel safe. I tell people that the library is a neutral zone, and it is Switzerland. In this whole world of craziness, the library is Switzerland. So you can be whoever you are and be accepted in the library. And that's the way all libraries usually do operate. I'm wearing a shirt now that says freedom. I don't know if you can see it. Okay. It happens to be the last day of Black History Month, and I was doing this today. I said, this is the shirt I should wear. But I believe that we also need to make sure that kids can always be supported in their inquiring. That's what we're supposed to be doing, is supporting them wanting to learn. And so I am definitely against any time that we're trying to muzzle kids, trying to strangulate what they're accessible to. One of the other groups that I work closely with is I work with the ELL group, and because of my work with the English language learners, I found out that I needed to be able to provide spaces for my Muslim students when they were going through the Feast of Ramadan. And they needed to have a place where they weren't necessarily having to sit in lunch and watch everyone eat. And so that began one of my ventures into being more aware of all of the religious diversity that we have in our schools. So those are things that the student didn't ask me. I wish the student had felt comfortable enough to ask me, but they did ask their teacher, and their teacher came and asked me, and I said, oh, definitely. I've also had students who wanted to have prayer time. And so, you know, they have prayer time in the library. Our high school actually has designated a prayer room. I don't have the square footage for that, but those are other things that we need to be concerned about as we talk about looking at diverse books, looking at diverse practices, looking at being more open to what people believe, some of their practices, supporting them where they are. Not trying to make them be something else, but supporting them where they are, loving them where they are, meeting them where they are in existing at this moment, instead of always trying to go into remodel mode. I think we do that with kids a lot. And kids have a lot that we can learn from, instead of, I have this new image on my computer now, and one of the images pour in and the other image is pull out. And basically, I think what we need to be doing more with kids is we need to be pulling out of them. We need to be finding out who they are, instead of always thinking that, you know, we're the great I ams and we know so much and we need to be pouring into them. We can also be learning from them. In addition to that, I have 3 student groups that I work with. I work with a Girl Who Codes group because, you know, girls are underrepresented in technology. So I have that group that I work with. And I also work with a group called Books and Media Advisory. Now that particular group is advising me. They're kind of like the junior librarians. So they're paying attention to how I select books. I actually give them a group of books that I'm thinking about, and they tell me whether or not they would pick the book out, whether or not they don't want the book. Why wouldn't they like the book? This month, in coming month, I'm also going to be convening a graphic novel group, because it is true that our graphic novels are being attacked a little bit more. And it is easier to take a picture and basically let it go viral and say, see, this is what's in this book. Well, I had somebody do that. It was 2 pages out of a 500-page book. But that's what happens with the graphic novel. I still have the book. It's still being challenged. I'm still fighting the challenge. I will continue to fight the challenge. And this book is showing the possibility of a heterosexual interaction, nothing frontal nudity or anything. And I'm thinking, okay, if we're having problems with this, then we've got a real, real long way to go. But we're still going to fight it. And I used to get nervous when, you know, people would challenge books, and depending on who your administrator is, and also get to know your administrator, because administrators often are trying to appease the parents, and the librarian is more trying to make sure that the collection is diverse. And so if your principals get to know you and get to understand what your group is, then you'll get more support from them, because they will be swayed more from parental impact than a librarian will. Our library code of ethics basically says, if we don't have a book in the library that offends us, then we don't have a good library collection. So that's where we stand. But principals and administrators have a whole different group of people and a whole different set of sensibilities that they need to be dealing with. So get to know your principals also. There was a couple other things I wanted to make sure that I let you know about. We have an African-American female group and an African-American male group, in addition to a Gay Straight Alliance group. So these are all groups that inform my collection. And right now they're actually doing a book collection for my Gay Straight Alliance shelf. I have a whole shelf designated, and I have nonfiction, I have fiction, and they inform me as to what we need to have. Ironically, a lot of the books that they choose, since I'm at a middle school, are more high school, but I'm very close friends with the Gay Straight Alliance advisor. And so we're just going to do what we need to do. And you might be reading about us. But my kids love coming to the library. I wish I had more kids coming to the library. Our schedule does not allow for a lot of browsing. But we do have some after school time. I'm working on changing the setup so it's more like a bookstore. We do try to make sure that if a kid comes to me and they're kind of hesitant about asking for a book, I kind of like lead them over to where that area is, because sometimes kids are not real comfortable. I have other kids who are like, you know, this is who I am, show me where it's at. And so we've got everything in between. And I just want to say that your librarian is most likely your friend. And just make sure you find out what their reconsideration policy is. Get to know what it is. If it doesn't have enough teeth in it, get some teeth in it. And make sure that you get some parents who are also aware and will be supportive of you, because it will be most likely a parent that will challenge the books. And if you've got some parents who are allies, then that does help.
Thank you both for such sound advice and strategies. We're going to be adding links to a number of student resources in the chat, including information about NCAC's new high school student program called Student Advocates for Speech. We're currently recruiting our first cohort of student leaders to form advocacy clubs in your high schools. These free speech clubs will advocate for the students' rights to read, fight censorship of student voices, and promote civic dialogue. We'll provide advocacy training, leadership, and publishing opportunities, as well as guidance and mentorship. So if you're interested in learning more or applying, check ncac.org, and we'll put the direct link in the chat. It is now time for our Q&A. Can I ask that all the panelists turn on their cameras? And also feel free to jump in to answer any question. The first question is for Ida from Renee. How is your activism received by the staff? Our students are too afraid to be too loud for fear of retribution.
So thankfully, in our protest, our teachers and administration were extremely supportive. And in that, I mean, we were able to conduct these protests in the way we were, because we made sure not to disrupt the school day in any way. We made sure to follow all the rules and the guidelines, to do this in a way that couldn't be warped into something it wasn't. We were for nonviolent protests, for equity and inclusion, and our staff and administration was really supportive of us. It was the board that was really making these decisions. And throughout this whole thing, I do feel for the teachers. We had two teacher advisors. I would like to shout them out, Mr. Ben Hodge and Miss Patricia Jackson, who have been so supportive throughout this whole journey. They have been our rocks. They have been the people on the front lines with us. And you know, a lot of teachers throughout this whole process and staff, their jobs are on the line. It's their livelihood with these types of things, because it's not them making these decisions, it's the board. And this is a really perilous time for teachers where they're going, there's teacher burnout, there's COVID, there's students in their classrooms who are, you know, discouraged every day, and it's not a good situation for them, because they're kind of in between this. It's like it's a battleground. They're in between, because you have your students on one side, and then you have, you know, administration and board members on the other side that are, you know, telling you two different things. So for teachers, it's two kind of it's a balance. It's lives to balance. So for us, thankfully, teachers have been very supportive. There was a lot of, you know, hesitation and anxiety surrounding everything. I know our teacher advisors, Mr. Ben Hodge and Ms. Patricia Jackson, had many need to know requests against them, which meaning that the board had requested that they have their computer searched and all their files searched and everything, that, you know, they went through it. So, for teachers, it is not an easy job to do, to stand up for something that they believe in. For students, it's quite easier job because we are seniors, we are graduating, but these teachers, they want to continue their jobs at the same district. So we are very grateful for their never-ending support.
Amanda, do you want to add anything? Or Olivia?
Yeah, I'd like to add onto what Ida said about how it's harder for teachers to definitely get involved because their jobs are on the line. And I think that's definitely a great point. And also, students, I feel like it's easier for some students to go up and speak. And I feel like it can definitely raise one's confidence knowing that you, or at least in my school, I don't know about other school districts, you pay, like you don't pay, but you provide the money for the school board's paycheck. Like our attendance, at least in my school, is the attendance counts, like for every day you're attended, how much money or whatever that goes to the school board. And so I think it's definitely empowering to know that they don't want to upset me. The school board doesn't want to upset me, and they're going to listen to me because I'm the one, quote unquote, in charge here, even though it's not how it seems. It's the reality. Whereas teachers, they get their wages from the school board, so it's harder for them to go out and speak about that.
And I just want to add that it's been really difficult for a lot of teachers in the district to even kind of gain the ability to speak out, because there had been a really just cruel Facebook group called, I'm pretty sure it's called the Concerned Parents of CYSD or something like that. And it was luckily shut down after it was discovered, like, by a lot of people who didn't really know it existed. But it was a really just disgusting group that that threatened teachers. They threatened a lot of teachers. They were saying some really cruel stuff about the LGBTQ plus community, about the BIPOC community, and about everything happening. So it's not even just a teacher's paycheck. It's their safety in their own community. I know the teachers got some cyber attacks. I know that there was a lot of threats put against them. So it's not only taxing and risky for their for their paycheck, but also for their mental well-being and their physical well-being.
Thank you, Olivia. My next question is from Veronica to the authors. So Maya, Mari, Naomi, feel free to jump in. It seems that depictions of physical expressions of love between hetero couples are perfectly fine, even for very young children. But the same sort of thing between gay or lesbian couples is labeled as pornographic, in quotes. What can be done to mitigate the damage this does to young LGBTQ plus youth?
I just think keep making more, keep representing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question, right? The main thing I worry about with my book being banned and challenged is young people internalizing a message that their identity or their sexuality is like not appropriate, or that it's not safe, or that it's in some way, just dangerous, immoral in some manner, which is of course not true. And I think the best thing that I can do is just like keep drawing queer people being happy and being successful and thriving and flourishing, and try to be a continued voice as like, hey, I'm like an adult queer non-binary person who's like having a successful career talking about these issues and making art about them. And try to encourage young people, like, if you are struggling with these feelings, if you're having questions, like maybe also make art about it as well, like express it through some medium, music, poetry, drawing, sort of whatever it is. But it's hard to know. And that challenge, or that the accusation that queer work is pornography, that has been used for like hundreds of years. It's like the most common challenge against queer content. And it is almost it almost doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It just gets flung around because people know it will raise an emotional response. So I think another thing is, if that is flung against your work, what you need to do is just like stay calm, realize that this is probably an accusation from someone who you don't agree with and who maybe didn't even read your book, and just like trust that like queer voices are needed and queer stories are important. And don't, if you're a creator, censor yourself. Like, don't let it stop you from creating like the work that you're called to create, because it is very important.
I feel like I've as a multi ethnic person. I've gotten looked down upon throughout my life just for interracial marriages or whatever. My parents are interracial. I'm bisexual. I'm gender fluid. All these things together. I'm so liminal in all of my identities that it kind of doesn't even matter anymore, like what people think. Because like I'm in the middle of everything. So when people fling stuff like that about queerness being pornographic, it's like I've been hearing this my whole life about all the other identities. It kind of slides off me. So I feel like I'm kind of armed for that already. But people who take that to heart just know that people who are throwing that at you are just doing it out of fear of their own fear. It's not about you. It's about their small-mindedness or their fear of being queer. Often, like a lot, I feel like a lot of people who are so anti-queer are actually queer and just trying to hide it or hide something else.
Or they feel that it threatens something about their own life, their own choices, their own way of living, and that maybe it's not the only way that you can live a happy and successful life. Because there's so many ways to be. Yeah, I agree with you, Mari, though. Like ideally, like not internal. It's like, either as an author, like don't internalize it. As a reader, don't internalize it. Like just like know that it is very much not about you, and just keep reading your queer books and making your queer art and thriving.
Thank you. My next question is for students. Did your school have any protest restrictions or policies? Did you know them or research them? Amanda, we'll start with you.
So my school is very strict on protests in general. It's basically to the point of no protests. Like I know there's so many like different things that they can pick out of if you have one thing go wrong in a protest that many people just kind of avoid it. And also it's hard to get a protest going specifically because there's not many people with the same opinions as you. Like it's very, very divided in opinions and stuff. So it's kind of hard to do that. But so as far as protests go, I'm not very sure on restrictions other than it's pretty much no protest.
Thanks, Amanda. What about Ida or Olivia? Would you like to add more to that question from your school?
Yeah, I think the reason we didn't start with protests, like we transitioned to protests because when we told them about what we'd been through this district, because I've been in this district since I was in preschool. So I recounted my experience with discrimination and racism and how people treated me and what I thought needed to be done. When I told them about this, it was not at all they were all not at all receptive to anything I was saying. Everything I said was met with skepticism, like, oh, really? Like in our district, this can't happen to you. There's no possible way. Because oftentimes I feel like people see, when I talk about my discrimination, people see that as an attack to them or their character or their personality. And that's not what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to make progress. So that the reason we had to transition to protest, because we were like, we are trying to talk to you, but our words aren't making a dent enough in your mind. So maybe if we show you the power that the student body has together and how many people in the student body believe in the same thing, maybe then you'll maybe reconsider. Because when I did talk to them, it was not in front of the public. So I think that really changes things. The intimidation or just the sheer amount of people that show up to something like that. So when we did do our protest, we were very careful because we know that this type of stuff is sensitive and oftentimes it can be misconstrued in ways that we didn't want it to be. And we wanted to stay set on our goals and our narrative and what we stood for. So we checked with administration administration. We had a meeting with administration and we were like, we want to do so and so. We want to protest this time to this time outside the school. And basically what they told us is like, this can't disrupt the school day. And if it does, then you cannot do it. But if it doesn't, then go ahead. And of course it can be violent. And of course there can be, inappropriate language or, things like that. That were just basic school guidelines to go by. And so we did create our own posters and we did tell people, we prefaced the whole protest on our social media. And even when we got to the school, we said, guys, this is a nonviolent, inclusive, equitable protest. We're not here to fight. We're here to just take a stand and make a visual representation of what we stand for. So I think that's how we were really successful with that.
Great to hear, Ida. My next question is from Crystal to Olivia. How did you spread the word in your community on your activism?
So we have a Instagram account for our group, Peru, and we really made sure to really spread the word on that account, and we reposted it places. I know that all of us officers reposted everything that our Instagram, had put out there. And once Hannah Shipley, an incredible community member who kind of did so much in spreading the word, once she caught wind of everything happening, she was a huge part in spreading the word to the community, because it was really easy for me and the rest of the officers to spread the word to students and tell them, hey, go home, tell this to your parents, your family. But it definitely would have been harder to kind of really reach all of the community, which was really awesome to have Hannah Shipley kind of put into the equation, because she did so much. So I would say just make ties with at least one bold, outspoken community member, and that can make all the difference. She was absolutely incredible. She put together a Amazon wish list where anyone all over the world could purchase books that were on our banned book list and send them to her. And she ended up hosting a community giveaway where she had all of the books. There was roughly 3,000, if I'm correct, and all of the books were gone within like 30 minutes. All of them were gone because the community just snatched up those opportunities. So really having connections with just a few really great community members makes so much difference.
Thank you so much, Olivia. That was great. I have actually another question for students. So I'm going to leave it up to you to decide. The question is, what are some ways for student allies to find each other when they need support for fighting a book ban? Maybe Ida can start with that.
So in this day and age, it's like all about social media. I know that's how we started, because the day we found out from the secondary source from the newspaper that these books were banned, immediately we were like, we have to get this out, because, all our followings on social media combined and all of our the students that followed us, the day after we had a blackout where we wore black in support in against the book ban and in support of our cause, and people actually showed up to do that. So after that very visual representation of like, this is going on, like this is real, like so many students are wearing black, like what is going on? First, that raises a question in these students' minds, like what is going on? And further on from that, there was the protest, and there was us speaking with literally a megaphone outside the school. So you really couldn't miss us advocating for it. You couldn't really miss what was going on. So I think we just kind of made it a big deal, and it's something that students like wanted to be involved in, because we advertised it, and it was something that was completely unacceptable, something that was, so detrimental to not only us, but the generations coming after us. So I think social media and like show the representation of what we had at school really helped to bring the community together and to bring students together and be like, hey, like we need to actually take action on this. And I think it was also just us as students taking action, because I do think that in our age group, especially, a lot of students think in like a certain way, like who's actually going to stand up to do something like this, who's actually going to speak up. Like we're like, as young people, we're scared because, you know, we've been told that our voices don't matter, and we've been told that if we do say something, people won't listen. So the fact that we made it a point to, you know, speak with a megaphone at protests 15 minutes before school, like students waking up 15 minutes before school, that's crazy, but we made it a point to do that. And so because we made it such a big point, people listened.
Thanks so much, Ida. Amanda, would you like to add something?
Yes. So I want to agree with Ida about social media. It's definitely a big factor in this with the technological age that we're in. Because that's how I found out about the ban at my district. And I think what also helped was having those specific areas in my school. Because like I said, not a lot of people at my school were very supportive of opinions from this, my side of opinions and my peers. But like the library or even my government class last semester, my government teacher would bring up topics just from like any recent like news source. So depending on the day, and you know, one day she brought up the book ban, and you can definitely find the people who agree with your opinions through that, because you know, they'll raise their hand, they'll talk about it, and you'll agree with their opinions, and then it's easy to connect with them, you know, after class. And that's how I think it's easier to get more people to be in support of your group and help to advance, you know, whatever you're trying to do, especially in the circumstance at my school where it can be looked down upon by others.
Thank you, Amanda. I have my next question is from Jennifer Wolf to Deborah. Can you please explain what exactly is meant by a reconsideration policy? What is the order of operation when censorship happens?
Okay. Well, the first thing is you get your group of librarians and you come up with a policy that basically starts when a parent usually says, we don't want this book either in the library, or it could be a curriculum book, because we've had both of those. So what happens is you have a series of steps that people have to go through. The first thing they do is they challenge it. They say, I don't like this book. Very seldom do they make this complaint directly to the librarian. Usually I find out about it 2 or 3 steps down the road. Then what we do is we take a look at the book. We let them know what the policy is, and our policy is, it can vary, but it should have something in it that says you have to formally fill out why you object to this book. So you write the name of the book, and then you have to write formally why you object to it. And then what we do is we say, okay, we'll review it, and then we get back to you with a longer form, and then that's when we say we'll convene a meeting. Unless you complete the second part of this, we don't convene a meeting, and the book still stays in circulation. And so the book that I'm currently being challenged on now has not had the next step on it, and so it is still in circulation at this particular time. And I just want to make sure that I answered the question.
Thank you, Deborah. Yes, I think you have.
Okay.
Thank you so much. The next question we have is from Crystal to the students. Have any of the students faced attacks on social media from adults or other students? Olivia, would you like to start with that?
So luckily, we've been very, fortunate to not. I personally have not received direct attacks from anyone. And my Instagram account is private, so that might have a minor thing to do with it. And as for the our group Instagram, we have received some, kind of dumb little cruel, comments that we occasionally have to delete, or, kind of talk to some of the students who say those things. But I would say that the big part of the attacks dealt with the Facebook group that has now been kind of shut down. So we were very, very fortunate in that the students were not necessarily the ones being attacked, unless you were looking through the comments of like the CNN post with us, or, you know, those kind of things. But I don't think, fortunately, any of us were directly attacked, except for our advisors. The teacher advisors were on many, many, many cases attacked on everything that they were doing. But I don't think us students did. Ida, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah.
Ida, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I mean, I think there was definitely like more tension in school. I could like, you know, feel it. You know, there was glaring looks. There were a lot of Instagram messages that I got about things, about people just being rude, or, you know, there's a difference between like genuinely wanting to be educated about something and just, you know, looking for a fight about something. So for me, it was looking at delineating between, is this person like there for me to like to have a conversation with, or is this person for, you know, there to fight? So there's, you know, that difference in people. And there, for me personally, on a personal level, throughout this whole process, there have been a lot of relationships that I've had to, you know, not be a part of anymore. And a lot of friendships that I've had to end because of, you know, what I stood for and everything. So that's kind of the sad end of the activism, where, you know, you can lose some of those things over time.
Amanda, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I've definitely had my fair share of offhand comments and, you know, not the nicest things said to me. More so, I think, more so to my peers rather than me, which I find it kind of interesting because I'm the most outspoken one of my peers, but they definitely, it affects them more, I would say. And so I think what's important is to, you know, if someone's dealing with that and they're getting a lot of hate, or it affects them like deeply, because that's also the thing. I don't think it affects me as much. I think I just kind of brush it off like, whatever, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, but I think it's important to support them and be there for them and, you know, say, hey, don't listen to them. Like, I think it's definitely important to do that.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I have another question for students from Pat. Can the speakers talk about the timelines of these challenges? When did the students find out that a challenge was being considered before action happened?
So
Perhaps.
in our case, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe we kind of caught wind of the article on September 1st of 2021. And we found out on the secondary local news source. And from there, it was spread to a lot of, you know, students and members of the community. And then we spent a lot of time kind of preparing and making signs and kind of planning out what we were going to do before we actually held our first protest on September 7th, I'm pretty sure. And in between that, we had done a group post, like Ida mentioned, where we had, you know, if you disagree, then you can wear black to school. But it really wasn't until September 7th that we began the protests. And from there, we had a few weeks of kind of switching up the dates. Sometime at the very beginning, it was every day. And then we moved to like a few days a week. Then we moved to like 2 days in a week. And we had community protests sprinkled into there. And Ida, you might remember the date that they actually reversed it. I do not, but it was a few weeks later after we had been protesting and speaking at board meetings and stuff like that. So
thank you so much, Olivia. Amanda.
I don't have anything to say on this topic, so sorry.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. This is from Crystal to Ida. Do you know who created the diversity list that was banned in your district?
Yeah, so it was actually a group of teachers on the Diversity Resource Committee. I wouldn't be able to name them all for you, but I know that one of our advisors, Ms. Jackson, was one of those teachers, but it was really a lot of teachers coming together to make this decision, which makes it that much more preposterous that, you know, the board would just, overlook the teachers, better judgment and, do something like this. I really do feel like there is a undermining of authority with the teachers and these types of things, especially, when, teachers are trained to do this type of stuff, and they know how to conduct their classroom. But it was really a big group of teachers.
Thank you so much for sharing this. This last question that we have might be something Deborah might be able to answer. So let's see if I can read it through. It's a little bit, it's a bit lengthy. And then after, I want to leave some time for everyone to give some final words. So Deborah, feel free to just answer as much as you can. And then we'll leave some time in the end for everyone to have a chance to say some final words. This is from Jennifer. She appreciates guidelines emphasizing that people who challenge a book must be specific about their objection. I'm wondering how to handle it when the reason offered doesn't ring true. For example, Mouse being censored for nudity, that doesn't read like the real reasons for objection. Recommendations for this kind of challenge and response.
What would happen in our case is we would take that challenge and then the Reconsideration Committee would actually look at it. And then what their job is to do is to verify whether or not there's any validity to the challenge. So with Mouse, we would look at it and say, is this really what's happening in this story? And if it is it gratuitous? Is it a part of the story? Does it help move the story along? And that's why the actual composition of the Consideration Committee is important. So yes, there are some, like I have one now that I'm fighting that they tell me it's pornographic. It's not pornographic, but we're going to read it. We're going to look at it, and then we're going to see if this is a valid issue.
Thank you, Deborah. So before, since we have about a few minutes left, I'd like to start with the authors, Maya and Mari, Naomi. Final words in terms of strategies and reflections from our conversations tonight, just to kind of leave as a takeaway. So I'll let Maya start, and then Mari can finish with her thoughts, and then we'll go to the students.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited that these types of conversations are being had more and more. I know I've personally been asked a lot more on book bans and book challenges and about censorship. I'm just really glad that it does seem like the awareness is going up amongst readers and teachers and librarians and booksellers and all sorts of people. So that I find really encouraging. And I think, yeah, just making sure that when you see a book banned, that you go out of your way to read it or go out of your way to recommend it, and even making like an Instagram post being like, hey, I read this book and it was really good. It's being challenged, but it was great. Like even that can like actually go farther than I think and even authors who have many social media followers do still see almost every post they're tagged in. And the fact that for me that like 95% of all the posts I'm tagged in are really supportive, it helps me a lot. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Maya. Mari, Naomi, final words?
I also want to say that this is very encouraging. I was not nearly as awesome as the students that we've seen tonight when I was their age. And so I'm just so impressed by how much you're doing. And like, I'm getting very emotional. I did want to say that when I was a teenager, I specifically sought out banned books because I wanted, and I still do, because I just want to see what the hubbub's about. I also wanted to say that, make a point that it seems that people of color and queer people are being super targeted. It's not about the books, it's about, well, white supremacy, really. And here's where I plug my databases. I run these 3 databases, the Cartoonists of Color and the Queer Cartoonists and the Disabled Cartoonist databases. If you go look them up, you'll just find thousands of authors that you could support, authors who might, because of these book bans, feel intimidated, not feel like they can say what they want to say or express themselves properly. Just go read their stuff before they get banned or after, and just support their work because we really need it right now. And I actually have a question for Deborah. Is it okay?
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
So I've been hearing these rumors, and I just want to set the record straight. Like, if someone donates a banned book to a library, is that helpful at all? Because I've heard that it's not, and I hear it is, and I don't know the answer.
It depends on their collection policy, because we also have a collection development policy. But if it fits within the realms of what they would normally have in their library, they would probably accept it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, let's move to the students. Ida, Amanda, Olivia, we'll go in that order. Final words.
I just want to say thank you for having me here, and thank you for providing this platform for me to speak. There are so many people here, so I'm really, really glad that we can speak on what we've done and get the message across in some way. Thank you to the authors that are here. Genderqueer is actually on the banned books list. So, the authors, you guys are really great. And I really also appreciate your voices being here and, advocating for your books. And I just want to say it's also really, really sad to see this type of thing happening all across the country right now. It's like in Texas and Bucks County, and I've heard stuff in Washington. I've heard legislation being actual in the Senate and stuff, legislation being passed about banning books. And I think that it's so disheartening, and I think that it's ridiculous. But I really, really hope that from seeing us, if there's any students here, that they can feel more encouraged to say something about what they see, because as hopeless as it might seem at the beginning, if you surprisingly take a stand for something, people are going to be in support of you, and you will get farther than you think you will. So I really encourage all the students to speak up about it wherever you are. Thank you.
Olivia.
One of the big things that I would say is silence can be absolutely deafening. But once you break that silence, there's really nothing you can do to bring the silence back. So it may seem terrifying, but even just a whisper breaks the silence. And then from there, more people will begin to whisper, and more people begin to whisper, until you have an entire movement that you started simply by uttering a few words. So it is terrifying to break the silence, but it is necessary, and you don't need to put a lot into it in order for it to kind of catapult into an incredible movement. And really make sure that you are educating yourself. I'm going to reiterate that point. Education is so crucial. So if you're seeing these book bans and you were really confused, educate yourself. If you don't really understand kind of the importance of representation, go research that, go talk to LGBTQ+ members, go talk to BIPOC members. Education is key, especially when you're talking to the people who have direct experience with it. So yeah.
Amanda.
Hey, so I'd like to say that I'm very thankful and grateful that I was invited to speak here, and it's great to share my own experiences as well as hear others share theirs. And I think the main point that I kind of want to talk about is having good connections and finding those connections to people who can really help you develop your I don't know how to pronounce it, but to help develop and continue what you're doing. I think that's very important. So that's all I just want to say is connections. Make sure you can be in touch with people who support you and who can actually change what's going on.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Lily.
I also just want to say thank you to everyone, all the other speakers, and just thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you to everybody who's here to hear student voices. I feel like that means so much, and that is the definition of a true ally. I think the most important thing to take away is get involved in your communities, get involved in your GSAs, your libraries, your PFLAGs, your local GLSEN chapters. There's plenty of places, and I'm sure that you can find one that fits you. Remember to go follow and share Project Uncensored on Instagram. Maya, you may see your book soon on Project Uncensored. And Maury, Naomi, we'll definitely have to get yours too. So definitely go follow.
Thank you, Lily. Deborah, really quickly.
I just thank you for being here. I'm toward the end of my career, so I feel very encouraged that I'm leaving it in good hands with all of these activists.
Thanks, Deborah. We're at the end of our time for tonight. Thank you so much for being here. And to our audience, thank you for your questions and engagement. And to our speakers, thank you for being so generous with your time and your stories. If you have any questions for us, would like info on how to sign up for our Student Advocates for Speech program, you can always email ncac@ncac.org. Have a good night, everyone.